Great, Jason. It's going great, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing very good. How's life going with you and the new album?
Life is going good, I would say. I'm keeping busy, and yeah, the response to the new record's been really, really positive, and that's always a good feeling once you let something go into the world that it's positively received. So, no complaints there, man.
So where does a person like Andy Timmons decide to make a Sgt. Pepper's album?
You know, it was kind of an odd circumstance, and it just kind of happened. It wasn't a conscious decision one day, hey, let's do a Beatles tribute record, but I had done an arrangement of the song Sgt. Pepper medleyed into Strawberry Fields Forever, and my band had been doing it on tour, and this one particular tour we were doing in Italy. The promoter and a friend of ours, this guy named Riccardo Capelli, realized it was going over so well, and he's a big Beatles fan himself, so he made the suggestion to me. He said, well, why don't, next time you come back to Italy, why don't you do a whole set of Beatles? Maybe we could do that. And I immediately thought in my head that, there's no way I can really do that. I don't think I could do a whole set of Beatles and keep it interesting in a power trio instrumental setting, But I think that's what kind of sparked my curiosity and my interest. What if I did other songs? What would they be? And I started off with a lot of non-Sgt. Pepper songs like In My Life and things along those lines. But I think the one that really took fruition next was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. That particular intro laid really nicely on the guitar, so I worked on that. Then it became kind of like this little hobby. I started just piecing together arrangements of different songs, and after I had a couple Sgt. Pepper tunes, then that's when I think I set the personal little challenge to myself. I wonder if I could arrange the whole Sgt. Pepper record just for fun, just as an exercise to see if I could do it. And it was so gratifying, once I could play Strawberry Fields or Lucy in the Sky front to back and kind of replicate all the sounds that I heard in my head. That was one of the key factors as I started down the path, was that I didn't want to reference the original record. I wanted it to all be from memory. So that's how I went about doing the whole project, was just referencing the recording as it plays in my mind. I've heard the tunes enough to have it pretty well ingrained, since I was alive when the record came out, and have been hearing it ever since. So I was born in '63, so the Beatles factored in largely to my musical education, certainly. So it really wasn't like, hey, let's do this record and it'll be commercially successful or whatever. It was really just a personal challenge of well, let's just see if I could do it. By myself. I didn't even show the band the arrangements until I had the whole thing in my head, basically. And so then we were actually in the studio recording some new original material for another Andy Timmons Band, kind of like a Resolution Part 2 kind of record. And 2 days became available at the end of the sessions. And the engineer said, well, we've got 2 extra days. Have you got any extra tunes? And I was out of original compositions, but it was the drummer that said, Mitch Marine is his name. He said, well, what about that Beatles stuff you're working on? I went, okay, if you guys want to go for it, let's do it. I hadn't thought about recording it right then, but okay, I've got it in my head, and I showed them the arrangements. And, 2.5 days later, we've got basically all the tracks. I kept about half of my live guitar tracks, and then took about a year to finish the other half. So anyway, there's a long answer to your very simple question.
Wow, and with this, let's say the melodies on your head and stuff, you didn't really have to go look at the music back to learn the songs. You knew them.
Yeah, no, they're well ingrained, as is all the Beatles material. For me is what has been my favorite music since I was a very tiny kid until this day. I can still listen to that music and marvel and enjoy. There's such a joy and spirit to what they did. Even in their darker times, there was still a pretty joyous vibe to what they achieved. So I think, especially for people that grew up with it, it's a very fond musical attachment that they have to this body of work.
And the recording technology, for this album, how was it done mostly?
The Resolution record, we'd done things. Part analog going to 2-inch tape with the bass and drums, and then guitars were recorded digitally. But the new record we did all into Pro Tools. We recorded through an old API desk to try to get as much analog circuitry as possible. But when it got down to it, we really thought it was sounding great, so we just kept it in the digital realm. And again, trying to keep, the credo was to keep it as simple as possible regarding. We didn't want to use a lot of plugins. We didn't want to use a lot of EQs. So all that was kept to a minimum. So all the sounds are kept as natural as possible, with no little reverb or compression on the drums, and no EQs on the guitars. We try to just get all the tones by mic placement and from my hands, basically, with guitar and amp.
So basically, what we're hearing from your guitar is just mic'd, and that's what it sounded like in the room.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. But also to let you know that on most songs, it's probably about 4 amps going on at once.
Mm-hmm.
We developed this, idea on the Resolution record. Like, if there's only going to be one guitar performance, like we did on the Sgt. Pepper record, there's only going to be one guitar performance. We've got to get, as great of tone as possible, and really spend time, trying to achieve, a really nice tone, warm, and something that takes up quite a bit of spectrum. If there's no other instruments being recorded, just, bass and drums and one guitar, it's got to really have quite a spectrum sonically. And what ended up happening on most of the Sgt. Pepper record was that we had 2 Mesa Boogie Lone Stars going in stereo, and then 2 Mesa Boogie Stilettos running also in stereo. And so I would split with an AB box. One side would go to 2 Lone Stars, and the other side would go to 2 Stilettos. In front of the Stilettos would be a tube driver and 2 Echoplexes. So they were running loud and clean, and distortion was coming from the tube driver. And then Lone Stars, I was using the gain on the amps, and then they were being split by a TC Electronics G-Force. And so in passages like the chorus of Sgt. Pepper or the chorus of Lucy in the Sky, when the Beatles would stack their vocal harmonies to achieve that kind of chorusing sound, I'll engage the chorus on those sections to try to emulate that layered kind of sound, even though it's just the one guitar. I can put some chorusing on it, and it kind of gives the effect of, some overdubs happening when, in fact, it's just a bit of effect.
The tone, that's incredible, the way you've envisioned it.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
One question here for you: with the Beatles remasters versus the originals, what do you think on that?
Oh, it's a huge leap forward. When the original CDs were released, what was it, 87? That those came out.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first thing I put on was Abbey Road. And my memory of Abbey Road was, the vinyl through a big, tube record player. That my family had, an old Motorola from 1959 with the fold-out speakers, and it's got the tube amp in there. And I just remember the huge fat drum sound, right? And I put the CD on. I'm like, it sounded like paper. I'm like, what happened to the sound of this record? It just sounded horrible to me. So I've always been a big fan of analog, and especially on the Beatles stuff, having vinyl, but even cassette tapes from the factory before everything was digitized. They sound amazing in my car. I went on a kick about 5 years ago of finding all the old factory cassettes and just playing those, and I thought, this sounds amazing. But when the remasters came out, I actually started noticing it on the Beatles' Love Cirque du Soleil release. When I heard those tracks, by then the analog to digital converters had really, had grown leaps and bounds. They'd improved so much. So I started recognizing, wow, that's the best Beatles material I've heard as far as on CD. That stuff sounds great. So then when they finally put the remasters out, this is as close as we're going to get, I think, digitally to the original analog sources. But I can still put on the vinyl and tape, and I feel it differently. I can't explain it to you, but it still feels different to me when I hear it, and it's from an original analog source. Mm-hmm. But the new remasters are fantastic. It's great having all the stuff in mono that wasn't available before. Because like if you listen to the mono mix of Nowhere Man compared to the stereo, just A/B those two. And, I challenge anybody to tell me that the stereo sounds better. But there's certain songs that just sound so much better in mono. The guitars are a lot louder on that particular track, and it's a wonderful sound. And I'm also convinced that the vocals are a little bit more in tune, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Beatles, no doubt, were monitoring in mono in their headphones. So when they're singing in mono to their original track. But then when it gets split in the stereo, it's going to reveal more of the tuning discrepancies. So that's just one of those little things that tweaks my ears. I'm listening down,
like the microphones used in that day, would that be the secret to get that, tone of an album?
I think it's definitely partly technology and the limitations thereof. I think that they were working on 4-track machines, even though America had 8 tracks by then. The Sgt. Pepper was done on a 4-track, and they would have to bounce down tracks to achieve the overdubs they wanted to do. But what also, what it forced was that you had to make decisions. Okay, we're going to put bass and drums or whatever on one track. You've got to commit to it, commit to the sound, commit to the relationships. And I think there's a beauty to that. You have to make those decisions early on, and you tend to be more productive and you get things done. These days, everything's got a separate track, and you can have, infinite tracks. It's been kind of fun for us to record the last two records in a fashion where, okay, no overdubs. I can replace my guitar track, but there's only going to be one. We're just going to have one guitar performance. I think limiting in that way is actually, it becomes challenging. It becomes a lot more interesting, to be honest. If I'd approached this record from a standpoint of, okay, I'm going to listen to the record, I'm going to transcribe everything and replicate everything, whether it be on guitar or keyboards or, mellotrons or whatever it might be, I think it would be far less interesting than what I did, as far as trying to incorporate everything that I could into one performance, no overdubs. I think that's why, a lot of people are interested in hearing it because they find out I've done it from memory. They find out there's no overdubs. I think it becomes more interesting than somebody just trying to replicate the record. You know what I mean?
Right. Because then you're adding your character.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping to. I want to present the songs as respectfully as possible. I'm not trying to reinvent them, but it's just an honest rendering, from a lifelong, passion for this music, and I'm hoping that shines through when people hear it.
Now, Andy, you're going to be touring on this?
Yeah, we just finished a couple of weeks in Italy, and we're lining up some dates now for the U.S. Then we'll go back to Europe. It looks like in April, May. So, yeah, we'll definitely be out there touring it. When the record came out while we were in Italy last month, but we didn't play the whole record. We were just doing maybe 6 or 7 tracks from the record, as well as all our stuff from previous records. But I think once the record's been out there for a while, it'll make sense for us to do some special shows where we play the whole record and then play some of our other songs at the end, perhaps. I think it'd be a lot of fun. We haven't played it live, start to finish, so it'll be a great challenge, I think. But it'll be a lot of fun once we're able to do that.
Well, Andy, keep on doing the great work you're doing. It's great to see.
Thank you. Now, where are you based?
I'm based in Nova Scotia, Canada.
Nova Scotia. Okay, great. Excellent.
You have a great weekend there, Andy.
Thanks, brother. You too, man. I really appreciate the time. Thanks, Jason.